Welcome back to the channel, guys. It is always a profound pleasure to sit down with you and dissect the incredibly complex, emotionally charged lives of the characters we watch and analyze every single day. Today, we are diving straight into a deeply heartbreaking psychological study of a woman who is entirely trapped by her own memories and unable to break free. We have some heavy emotional developments to unpack regarding a very specific love triangle. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let us get right into the emotional unraveling we are witnessing. I want to start by looking directly at the moment Leslie decided to finally cut the cord with Marcel. If you ask me, this breakup was never really about Marcel. And it certainly was not about his lifestyle, his quirks, or his boat. Marcel offered her something incredibly rare and valuable in this chaotic world: genuine, uncomplicated, and present affection. He was right there, offering his heart, ready to build a stable present and a promising future with her. But Leslie simply could not accept it. Why? Because her hands, her mind, and her deeply bruised heart are completely full, clinging desperately to the ghosts of her past. When she broke things off with Marcel, it was a glaring, painful admission that she is entirely incapable of living in the present moment. We have all seen people do this, guys. We watch them self-sabotage perfectly healthy, viable opportunities for happiness because they are addicted to the familiar, agonizing pain of an old love. For Leslie, Marcel was just a placeholder, a temporary distraction that could never drown out the deafening, persistent echoes of Ted. She let go of a man who actually wanted her, all because she is emotionally paralyzed by a man who no longer does. The past is a remarkably heavy burden, and right now, Leslie is carrying it all by herself, dragging it around like an anchor. If you look closely at her behavior over these recent events, you realize that she is not just remembering her history with Ted, she is actively trying to live inside of it. Every decision she makes, every interaction she has, is heavily filtered through the romanticized lens of what she once shared with him. I truly believe that she has elevated their past to such an extreme degree that it has become a mythological standard that no real living person could ever possibly compete with. She has convinced herself that the love they shared was so profoundly unique, so cosmically destined, that it simply must still exist somewhere beneath the surface, just waiting to be reignited. But this is the ultimate danger of nostalgia, guys. Nostalgia is a brilliant liar. It edits out the pain, the betrayal, the arguments, and the fundamental reasons why things fell apart in the first place, leaving only the intoxicating highlights. Leslie is intoxicating herself with these cinematic highlight reels, completely ignoring the harsh reality that the man she is pining for has fundamentally changed and completely moved on. This brings us to that agonizing, desperate scene at Ted's front door. I want you to really visualize this moment with me because it is dripping with raw vulnerability and desperately misplaced hope. Leslie walks up to that door, her heart undoubtedly pounding in her chest, carrying the heavy, fragile expectation that just seeing her face will somehow magically reignite the flame he once had for her. She knocks on the wood, and then there is nothing, just a vast, empty silence. If you ask me, that silence is the loudest, most devastating sound she could possibly hear in that moment. When you put yourself out there like that, when you strip away your pride, swallow your dignity, and literally show up at someone's doorstep, you are handing them all of your emotional power. You are saying, "Here I am, please choose me." And when the door remains firmly shut, the rejection is absolute and undeniable. It is not just a missed connection, it is a profound invalidation of her worth in his eyes. I felt a deep, empathetic ache watching her stand there, waiting for a savior who was never going to open the door. It is a harsh, brutal lesson in boundaries and the painful reality that you cannot force someone to care simply because you are hurting. But what does she do next? Instead of walking away with whatever shred of dignity she might have left, she leans even further into the fantasy. She leaves a bottle of wine and a single glass right there on his doorstep. Guys, we need to analyze this because this is not just a casual, friendly gift. This is a silent, desperate plea for attention. It is a cinematic, highly dramatized gesture from a woman who truly believes she is starring in a tragic romance rather than facing the cold, hard truth of a finished, expired relationship. By leaving the wine, she is essentially leaving a piece of her soul waiting on his porch, exposed to the elements. She is communicating, I am still here waiting for you to invite me back in. It is an incredibly passive-aggressive way of demanding his attention without having to face the immediate, crushing rejection of a face-to-face conversation. But let us be brutally honest here with ourselves. It is also deeply pathetic. I say that not with harsh judgment, but with profound sympathy. We have all done embarrassing, out-of-character things in the name of heartbreak, but this specific gesture proves just how detached from reality Leslie has become. She is trying to communicate with a version of Ted that simply no longer exists. Unable to cope with the deafening silence of that closed door, Leslie inevitably retreats to the one place people go when they want to numb their racing minds, the local bar. But here is the ultimate irony about using alcohol to cure heartbreak, something I think we can all learn a valuable lesson from. You go to the bar to forget, to blur the sharp edges of your painful reality, but the alcohol actually acts as a terrifying magnifying glass. As Leslie sits there pouring drink after drink, she is not washing away her pain. She is marinating in it, allowing it to soak deeper into her bones. I watched her sitting in that dimly lit room, surrounded by the chatter of other people, yet entirely, profoundly alone in her own universe. The atmosphere of the bar, the clinking of glasses, the low murmur of happy conversations around her, it all just served to starkly highlight her own bitter isolation. She went to that bar to escape the thought of Ted, but instead she found his memory waiting for her at the bottom of every single glass. This is the tragic, inescapable cycle of unresolved grief. You try to run from it, but you carry the ghost with you wherever you go, and alcohol only gives the ghost a louder voice. As the alcohol takes a firmer hold on her senses, the floodgates of her memory burst completely open, and she loses all control over her thoughts. We see her mind assaulted by vivid, agonizingly beautiful flashbacks of her early days with Ted. She remembers the intense passion, the secret glances across crowded rooms, the undeniable, magnetic electricity that used to flow between them when they first fell in love. She remembers the man who looked at her as if she was the absolute center of his universe. But this is where the human mind plays its cruelest, most unforgiving tricks. Her brain is actively weaponizing her own cherished memories against her. By forcing her to vividly relive the highest, most euphoric highs of their relationship, her mind is making her current lonely low feel infinitely deeper and darker. If you ask me, this is a literal form of psychological self-harm. She is intentionally touching the hot stove of her past, burning herself over and over again because the pain of the burn is the only remaining connection to Ted she has left. It is genuinely heartbreaking to witness a woman so capable, so vibrant, reducing herself to a helpless prisoner of her own nostalgic hallucinations. And then comes the emotional climax of her night, the specific scene that absolutely shattered me to watch. Leslie finally returns to her dark, quiet, empty home. She is emotionally exhausted, physically drained, intoxicated, and completely stripped of all her carefully constructed defenses. In the darkness, she reaches for an old, torn, battered teddy bear, a sentimental gift Ted gave her many years ago during happier times. She clutches this ragged, decaying toy to her chest, sobbing uncontrollably into its worn fur. Guys, you cannot possibly ask for a more poignant, devastating visual symbol of her internal emotional state. That torn bear is Leslie. It represents her shredded heart, her worn out, exhausted hopes, and the decayed state of a love that was once soft, comforting, and beautiful, but is now just a dilapidated relic of the past. By holding onto that bear so tightly, she is trying to physically embrace a memory that is slipping through her fingers. In that singular, vulnerable moment, she reverts to a frightened, insecure version of herself, desperately craving the safety and unconditional love she once felt. But a stuffed animal cannot hold you back. It cannot wipe your tears or tell you everything will be okay. It is a devastating, crushing visual representation of her ultimate, inescapable loneliness. This brings us to the absolute crux of Leslie's current psychological crisis, the excruciating, unavoidable realization that her love is entirely unrequited. There is a very specific, hollow kind of agony that comes from realizing you are pouring your entire soul, all your energy, and all your love into an empty vessel that gives nothing back. Leslie has spent so much time and mental energy convincing herself that their connection was unbreakable, that their bond transcended time, logic, and circumstance. But the truth is staring her right in the face, and it is brutally unforgiving. She is fighting a massive, exhausting, emotional war for a man who is not even on the battlefield anymore. The pain she is experiencing right now is not just the loss of Ted, it is the death of her own ego. It is the complete shattering of the romantic narrative she built her entire adult life around. When you realize that the person you view as your ultimate soulmate views you merely as a closed, dusty chapter, it fundamentally breaks your understanding of the world. Leslie is standing alone in the smoking wreckage of her own illusions, and the silence from Ted's side of the wall is absolutely deafening. We have to talk about Ted's role in this dynamic because his silence is not passive. It is a very active, deliberate choice. Leslie is getting the absolute cold shoulder, and it is entirely intentional on his part. Ted has moved on. His eyes, his heart, and his future plans are entirely focused on Shanice. While Leslie is sitting in the dark, clutching a torn teddy bear and weeping over what used to be, Ted is out there in the light, building a vibrant, loving, and forward-moving reality with someone else. He is bringing Shanice chocolates, planning for a shared future, and integrating her into the fabric of his life. The contrast between his bright present and Leslie's dark stagnation is staggering and deeply unfair to watch, but that is the harsh reality of life. Ted is not obligated to remain chained to the past just because Leslie refuses to leave it. His coldness towards her is a necessary protective boundary, a way of shielding his new life with Shanice from the chaotic, desperate emotional storm that Leslie constantly brings. But for Leslie, every ignored gesture, every unanswered knock feels like a physical, violent blow to her spirit. It is a constant, daily, agonizing reinforcement that she is no longer the leading lady in his story. She is just an extra. He is actively trying to write out of the script What makes this entire situation even more tragic is that Leslie has been explicitly warned about this destructive path. Her own daughter, Eva, looked her dead in the eye and told her the harsh, unvarnished truth that she desperately needed to hear. Eva told her to stop chasing a ghost, to move on with her life, and to recognize that she deserves a man who will actually choose her and be present for her. When your own child has to step in, reverse roles, and parent you through a heartbreak, you know you have hit absolute rock bottom. Eva sees the immense destruction her mother is causing to her own life. She sees Leslie foolishly throwing away a perfectly good, loving man like Marcel for a delusional fantasy that will never, ever materialize. But Leslie was too blind, too stubborn, and too deeply addicted to her own pain to listen to reason. If you ask me, hearing that objective truth from Eva should have been the ultimate wake-up call, the bucket of ice water she needed. But instead, it just made Leslie defensive and pushed her further into isolation. Sometimes the truth is so painful that we would rather live in a comfortable, familiar lie, and that is exactly the tragic choice Leslie has made. Now, she is paying the ultimate lonely price for ignoring the people who truly care about her well-being. As Leslie sits alone in her house, the feelings of abandonment are completely overwhelming her psyche. But it is more than just missing Ted's physical presence. It is a profound existential loneliness that shakes her to her core. She built her entire identity, her self-worth around being the woman Ted loved enough to risk it all for. When he took off his wedding ring for her all those years ago, it validated her in a way nothing else ever had. It made her feel chosen, special, and victorious over every other woman. Now, with him actively choosing Shanice and deliberately ignoring Leslie's very existence, that core validation has been violently, permanently ripped away. She feels completely discarded, like a broken toy that has lost its shine and been thrown in the trash. The grand myth of their special, unbreakable connection has completely dissolved into thin air, leaving her to face the terrifying, ego-crushing possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was never as important to him as he was to her. This kind of ego death is incredibly difficult to recover from because it requires you to rebuild your entire sense of self-worth from scratch without relying on the external validation of the person who broke you in the first place. Consequently, we are watching Leslie lose her faith entirely, and it is a devastating thing to witness. She is losing faith in love. She is losing faith in herself. And she is losing faith in the possibility that she will ever find a man who will truly unconditionally choose her and stay. This is the absolute most dangerous phase of heartbreak, guys. When you internalize rejection to this severe degree, you start to believe that you are fundamentally flawed and unlovable. Leslie is looking at her failed past, her discarded relationship with Marcel, and her humiliating, unrequited obsession with Ted, and she is drawing the heartbreaking, incorrect conclusion that she is the problem. She is convincing herself that she is simply destined to be the woman left behind, the woman who is never enough. As an observer, this is incredibly painful to watch because we know it is not true. Leslie is absolutely worthy of love, but she will never, ever find it as long as her hands are completely full of the past. You cannot possibly embrace a new, beautiful future when you are locked in a desperate chokehold with a ghost. Ultimately, guys, Leslie's journey right now is a profound, deeply educational, cautionary tale about the severe dangers of living your life in the rearview mirror. We have to learn from her heartbreaking mistakes. We have to understand that true emotional strength does not lie in holding on tightly to a love that has clearly expired. True strength lies in having the immense courage to let it go and walk away. Leslie is currently drowning in an ocean of her own making, weighed down by a bottle of wine, a torn teddy bear, and a million heavy memories of a man who is busy loving someone else. Until she makes the conscious, difficult decision to drop the baggage, to face the painful reality of her present circumstances, and to start choosing herself over Ted, she will remain trapped in this endless cycle of misery. I genuinely hope she finds the internal strength to walk away from Ted's closed door for good and finally open a new one for herself. What do you guys think about Leslie's emotional state? Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next deep dive.